The bright morning sun cast a golden glow over the centuries-old Ashcombe Castle as luxury cars lined the stone driveway for one of the most prestigious charity galas in the country. Guests dressed in elegant designer clothing admired the historic estate that had belonged to one of the oldest aristocratic families for generations. Standing quietly near the entrance was a single father named Graham Holloway, wearing a clean but inexpensive suit while holding the small hand of his 8-year-old daughter, Sophie. They had been invited because Graham's construction company had recently restored one of the castle's historic bridges free of charge after severe flooding threatened the nearby village. But before they even entered the Grand Hall, a young aristocratic heiress named Celeste Ashbourne looked at Graham with cold amusement and publicly declared that people like him would always remain beneath her family's bloodline, no matter how hard they worked. The crowd fell silent. Graham lowered his eyes, gently squeezed Sophie's hand, and walked inside without saying a single angry word. No one present imagined that only months later he would become the legal owner of the very castle her grandfather had spent his entire life preserving. Before we continue this emotional story, if you believe kindness, humility, and second chances are worth more than pride or family status, please like this video, leave a heartfelt comment, share it with someone who believes in doing the right thing, and subscribe to Kindness Paradise. Your support allows us to continue sharing stories that inspire hope and compassion. Graham Holloway had never cared about social status. After losing his wife, Eleanor, to a sudden illness 6 years earlier, every decision he made revolved around giving Sophie a stable, loving childhood. During the day he managed a small restoration company specializing in repairing historic buildings. At night he helped Sophie with homework, cooked simple dinners, and read adventure stories until she fell asleep. Life was never easy. There were months when every dollar mattered, but Graham believed that honest work and quiet integrity were treasures no bank account could measure. Few people knew that Graham's fascination with historic architecture had begun when he was a teenager. He had spent years volunteering alongside elderly craftsmen who taught him how to restore ancient stone walls, timber roofs, and stained glass windows using traditional methods. While others chased quick profits by replacing history with modern construction, Graham dedicated his career to preserving buildings that carried generations of memories. Every restored structure represented another chapter of history protected for families yet to come. Ashcombe Castle stood as the greatest symbol of that history. Built more than 2 centuries earlier by Celeste's great-grandfather, it had survived wars, storms, economic crises, and changing governments. Tourists admired its magnificent towers and carefully maintained gardens, believing the Ashbourne family remained as wealthy as ever. Behind the impressive appearance, however, hidden financial problems quietly threatened everything. Lord Edmund Ashbourne, Celeste's elderly grandfather, understood the truth better than anyone. The cost of preserving such an enormous estate had become overwhelming. Rising taxes, expensive repairs, and years of declining investments had created debts that even the family's remaining fortune could no longer cover. Edmund quietly hid those worries from his granddaughter because he wanted her to remember the castle as a place of beauty rather than financial struggle. Unlike Celeste, Lord Edmund noticed Graham's kindness during the charity gala. He observed the gentle way Graham encouraged Sophie, thanked every member of the staff, and complimented the restoration work without seeking attention. Later that afternoon, Edmund personally guided Graham through several sections of the castle rarely shown to visitors. They discussed ancient stonework, forgotten craftsmanship, and the importance of preserving history for future generations. Graham spoke with genuine admiration rather than envy, something the elderly nobleman deeply appreciated. Meanwhile, Celeste remained convinced that family heritage alone guaranteed respect. Raised among stories celebrating noble ancestry, she believed bloodline determined a person's worth. She rarely noticed the gardeners, cleaners, maintenance workers, or local craftsmen whose dedication allowed the estate to continue welcoming visitors every day. Although she considered herself generous during public charity events, she had never truly learned the quiet dignity of humility. Several weeks after the gala, financial reality finally caught up with Ashcombe Castle. Creditors demanded immediate payment, restoration projects stopped, and confidential negotiations began with international developers interested in transforming the historic estate into an exclusive luxury resort. The proposal promised enormous profits but required demolishing several historic buildings that held priceless historical significance. Lord Edmund refused to approve such plans, even though he knew his family might lose everything. News of the possible sale spread quickly throughout the region. Historians, preservation groups, and local residents feared that centuries of history would disappear forever. Graham quietly followed every development while continuing his own restoration projects. Although his company remained modest compared to giant corporations, years of disciplined business decisions had slowly transformed it into one of the country's most respected heritage restoration firms. Unknown to almost everyone, Graham had recently entered a partnership with several historical preservation foundations that believed historic landmarks should remain protected rather than commercially exploited. One sunny morning, Graham received an unexpected phone call from the legal office managing Ashcombe Castle's future. The trustees had begun searching for buyers capable not only of purchasing the estate but also of guaranteeing its permanent preservation. Graham listened silently before thanking the caller. He never imagined his name would even appear on such a list. As he looked across the construction site where skilled workers carefully restored another historic church, Graham realized that life sometimes presents impossible choices disguised as extraordinary opportunities. He also knew that if he became involved, he would once again cross paths with the woman who believed he stood beneath her bloodline. Neither Graham nor Celeste understood that the greatest battle ahead would not be about wealth, titles, or ownership. It would be about discovering whether true legacy is inherited through family names, or earned through character. The news that Ashcombe Castle would soon be placed on the market spread across the country like wildfire. Historians feared the magnificent estate would be turned into another luxury resort where centuries of heritage would disappear behind expensive renovations and private memberships. Local families worried that public access to the castle grounds would end forever. Lord Edmund Ashbourne watched the growing uncertainty with a heavy heart, knowing that every passing day brought his family closer to losing everything his ancestors had built. Although he rarely admitted it, he had already accepted that someone else would soon own the castle. His only remaining hope was that the next owner would love its history as much as he did. Graham Holloway spent several sleepless nights considering the proposal placed before him. His business had grown far beyond the small restoration company he had started years earlier. Through honest work, careful investments, and partnerships with preservation foundations, he had quietly built a respected organization dedicated to protecting historic landmarks. Purchasing Ashcombe Castle would require nearly every available resource he possessed, but Graham knew opportunities like this came only once in a lifetime. He was not chasing prestige. He simply refused to watch another piece of history disappear beneath commercial development. As legal negotiations quietly began, Celeste Ashbourne remained convinced that wealthy aristocratic investors would rescue the estate. She never imagined that Graham's name appeared among the final candidates approved by the trustees. When she accidentally saw his file during one of the meetings, disbelief quickly turned into anger. In her mind, a widowed contractor from an ordinary family could never belong among people deciding the future of Ashcombe Castle. Pride blinded her from recognizing how much Graham had already accomplished through years of discipline and sacrifice. Meanwhile, Sophie became fascinated by the castle after hearing her father describe its remarkable history. On weekends she helped him study old architectural drawings, learning about ancient stone bridges, medieval gardens, and handcrafted wooden ceilings. Graham explained that buildings become valuable not because they are expensive but because they carry the memories of generations. Sophie listened carefully, slowly understanding why preserving history mattered so deeply to her father. One bright morning, Graham received permission to conduct a complete structural inspection of the estate before making his final decision. As he carefully examined hidden tunnels, damaged foundations, and weathered towers, Lord Edmund accompanied him through every corridor. Unlike many wealthy investors who discussed profit margins, Graham asked questions about the craftsmen who originally built the castle, the families who had lived there, and the local traditions connected to each room. Watching the single father respectfully touch centuries-old stone walls with genuine admiration, the elderly nobleman felt hope returning for the first time in months. Later that afternoon, Lord Edmund privately confessed the painful truth. The castle had survived wars, fires, and economic crises, but what threatened it now was not nature or conflict. It was pride. He admitted that his family had spent too many years protecting their surname while forgetting that true nobility is measured through character rather than ancestry. Graham listened respectfully without offering judgment. He understood that every family carried regrets hidden behind closed doors. The final bidding day arrived beneath a brilliant blue sky. Representatives from powerful investment groups filled the grand library where sealed offers would be opened. Many expected an international corporation to submit the highest proposal. Instead, silence filled the room when the trustees announced that Graham Holloway's Preservation Partnership had presented the strongest financial offer while guaranteeing permanent protection of the castle, its gardens, museum collections, and surrounding village. Unlike competing developers, Graham promised that Ashcombe Castle would remain open to the public, continue employing local residents, and preserve every historic structure. Celeste could barely believe what she had heard. The same single father she had once dismissed as beneath her family's bloodline had legally become the new owner of the estate carrying her ancestors' legacy. She felt humiliation, confusion, and regret all at once. Yet Graham showed no sign of revenge. He simply thanked the trustees, shook Lord Edmund's hand with quiet respect, and promised to protect everything generations before him had worked so hard to preserve. As reporters celebrated the extraordinary purchase outside the castle gates, Lord Edmund smiled through tears. He realized that history had not been lost. It had simply found a guardian worthy of carrying it forward. But Graham's greatest decision was still waiting. Because the first official act of the castle's new owner would surprise everyone, especially the woman who once believed he would never belong. The morning after the purchase was finalized, the first rays of sunlight illuminated Ashcombe Castle as reporters, historians, and local families gathered outside its ancient gates. Everyone expected Graham Holloway to celebrate his extraordinary achievement by announcing expensive renovations or exclusive memberships. Instead, he stood quietly beside his daughter Sophie, looking at the centuries-old walls with the same respect he had shown from the very beginning. To him, the castle had never been a trophy. It was a promise to generations that history deserved to survive. His very first decision stunned everyone. Rather than removing the Ashbourne family from the estate, Graham publicly announced that Lord Edmund Ashbourne would remain at the castle as its honorary historical curator for the rest of his life. He explained that no one knew the history, traditions, and stories hidden within those walls better than the man who had spent decades protecting them. The elderly nobleman was overcome with emotion. Tears filled his eyes as he realized that the single father his granddaughter had once looked down upon had shown more honor than many people born into wealth. Then Graham made a second announcement that touched the entire community. A large section of the estate would become a free educational center where children could learn traditional craftsmanship, architecture, history, and restoration skills. Scholarships would be offered to young people from working-class families who dreamed of preserving historic landmarks. Graham wanted every child to understand that greatness is built through dedication, compassion, and hard work, not inherited through a surname. Standing quietly among the crowd, Celeste Ashbourne felt the weight of her own actions more heavily than ever before. Watching Graham protect her family's legacy instead of taking revenge shattered every belief she had carried since childhood. She remembered the painful moment at the charity gala when she had declared that he stood beneath her bloodline. Now she understood that true nobility had nothing to do with ancestry. It was revealed through humility, generosity, and the courage to forgive. Later that afternoon, Celeste walked alone through the castle gardens until she found Graham restoring a weathered stone fountain with several local craftsmen. She approached with genuine humility and offered a sincere apology for judging him by his background instead of his character. Graham accepted her apology without bitterness. He explained that resentment only builds new walls, while forgiveness creates doors for people to become better than they once were. Sophie smiled warmly as she watched the two adults shake hands beneath the old oak trees, proving that kindness often heals wounds pride can never mend. Months passed, and Ashcombe Castle flourished once again. Visitors returned in greater numbers than ever before, not because of luxury events, but because they admired a place where history had been preserved with love instead of greed. Local businesses prospered, new apprentices learned ancient restoration techniques, and families spent weekends exploring gardens that remained open to everyone. The castle had become a symbol of hope rather than privilege. Lord Edmund often walked beside Graham through the ancient halls, proudly introducing him as the man who had saved both the estate and its true purpose. He quietly admitted that his ancestors would have been far prouder of a guardian like Graham than of anyone who valued titles above humanity. Those words became one of the greatest honors Graham had ever received. Celeste dedicated herself to helping manage the educational foundation established inside the castle. She spent countless hours working alongside volunteers, historians, and local children, determined to earn respect through service instead of expecting it through heritage. The transformation within her inspired many people who had once believed that pride could never change. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, share it with someone who believes kindness is stronger than pride, leave a heartfelt comment, and subscribe to Kindness Paradise for more emotional stories filled with hope, redemption, and second chances. Special request, please comment, character is the greatest legacy. As the golden afternoon sunlight bathed the towers of Ashcombe Castle, Graham watched Sophie run happily across the same gardens where he had once been treated as someone unworthy. He smiled, knowing that life had never been about proving anyone wrong. It had always been about proving that kindness, honesty, and perseverance could build a legacy greater than any bloodline. Because castles may be inherited, fortunes may be earned, but true greatness is remembered only by the way we treat others.